Next panel is has not a single speaker, but two wonderful ladies. We have Marina, Gracen, Farrell, and Carrie Fischer. Carrie is Globalization Services Manager at Subway. We actually have Subway right across the street, so I think we might go and see how is the localization there. Marina is localization manager and consultant at Pearson. She has been for 14 years, so they both have very extensive knowledge about the localization industry, and they were also a joy to prepare a presentation with. They were really nice, very thoughtful. I do not know what you guys have for us today, but I'm really excited because from what we've seen from the mock-up, from the training session, you guys are prepared. Marina, can you hear us? Can you join us?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Marina.
Hello.
So what time is it in?
That's my sound. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, the sound is nice.
And you can hear me
so
okay?
I know Marina.
Yep,
Yeah.
I can hear you, Marina.
Great.
So I know Marina is 7 a.m.
You know, this is the amazing thing about localization and why we work so hard to localize, because I thought we were on at 8:30 a.m. and it turns out we're on at 7:30 a.m. Pacific, but we are very flexible and here we are. Thank you so much, Anna. Hi, Carrie. Everyone. Привет. It's so good to see you, everyone. And wow, what a great conference so far. Oh my goodness. I didn't get a chance to see much of Diego, but I saw Renato, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. for you, Carrie.
Yeah.
And that was a great presentation and really set the stage well. You know, and everybody else that came along, Eugene, Maria, and Diego, fantastic. And I can't wait to see the panel after us. But I think we're ready to get started. Thank you so much for your very generous welcome, and thanks to Marina, Sizova, and Anna for this great invitation. So we'll take it from here. Thanks so much, Anna.
We're really excited to have you.
Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. Again, it is so cool to be part of this presentation from so many different areas of the world, which is exactly what we do in localization, and to be involved in shaping the future of the industry. So as Anna had already graciously introduced, Carrie Fischer, who is with Subway, I'm with Pearson. Carrie, it's so good to be on these panels with you. I just always cherish every time we get a chance to share together. And I think the way we were framing this whole presentation is more of a conversation. What do you say?
Definitely. It's definitely a conversation, and we encourage, you know, questions and interaction from the audience. That's what makes it fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we got a chance to do a little preview the other day. So as everybody has seen, there's a Q&A button. The chat button is great for conversations within networking within yourselves and just saying hi, but please do put Q&A questions into that little tab that says Q&A. We'd be very happy to talk to you, any questions you have. So to get started, this presentation is probably the simplest one I've ever put together. It's just a few words on a few slides because this is a conversation and there's so much to look forward to. We just want to get started and jump in. So, Carrie, I wanted to ask why? Why do we want to look at future proofing? And why do we're not translators, but we work with a lot of translators through the years. So what is in your background that helps you address what to do for the future?
It's interesting because this question has come up so many times in the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years, and we're still talking about it. So I've been in the localization industry for 27 years, long time. Always on the buyer side. I've always bought services from the LSPs and the technology vendors. And just watching it grow from this really small industry to me in the 90s to having this multi-million dollar industry it is today has just been really amazing. And I think it's important to understand where we started in order to appreciate what's happening today and really all the opportunities that are out there for the future. I mean, just looking at translation management systems, right? TMSs. Um, when I was first starting out in localization, there was no TMS. And when it did come along, it was
Yeah.
very specific to certain vendors and it was quite expensive. But now it's accessible to everybody. I have one for Subway. I use it. It's cloud-based. It's not expensive. And there's, a ton of companies that provide this service now. And even in education. So my degree is in French, but there was no localization degree. I also took Russian, by the way, and I wanted to point out that I'm wearing my Chero White necklace, which is only found in Siberia. So anyway, that's my,
Cool.
and I took anyway, 2 years of Russian, which was great. But you look at the things that are out there now, all of these degrees that you can get in localization, you can train to be a localization project manager or an engineer. Um, we have the Monterey Institute of International Studies in California, University of Surrey. We've got a bunch of schools in Dublin. It's just it's a never-ending cycle, I think. What changes have you seen over the past few years?
Oh my gosh, yes. So, oh my goodness, when I started, I've been in localization a long time, but I've kind of weaved in and out. And this is something I want to bring up to those who are new to any of these types of fields industries, that you can go from career to career and learn so much, pick up that and transfer. So when I started off in graphic design way back. And those days we would work primarily in English, but always with an eye to, accommodating the typography I got into. How do you get the accent? And back then it was hard to get accented characters because our keyboards didn't have accented characters. So the big changes I've seen is the effort that it used to be to force language code pages onto systems. And gosh, Trados back in the day, that was called Trados Workbench back in the
That's
2000s when I
yeah,
started. Yeah. And I worked for a small company, ILE, International Language Engineering. And we had to take files apart and scale and descale and then put the language in and then put them back in. Just amazing how much effort. These days, what is it? Let's see, we have Studio 2021 coming out for Trados. So, and then all the cloud-based things. So I think that's a very good point to look from the future that started off, and it goes exponentially into what can be possibilities for anybody. So there's job possibilities, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Because things change and they change quick, we just prepare ourselves and then go out and get it. So yeah, thanks for covering those points about there's even graphs that go, effort decreases, amount of words increases. And so learn the technologies, find your passion. And
yes,
wouldn't you
for
say
sure.
that's kind of recurring thread for you, Carrie, is that we have passion regarding languages, we have passion regarding localization. And what's the difference between translation and localization? Well, translation just changes words, right? If I took something and take English to French, but the commas, the decimal commas are wrong, and the time and dates are wrong. So now we localize and we fix everything to be per the region.
Yeah.
That's
Even if
localization.
we never translate it, right? We
Yeah,
regionalize it. We make it usable in that target country. Yeah.
very good. Yeah, so absolutely. So the changes we've seen, and then also, what are credentials for us to even be here and talking about this? I've interviewed quite a few interesting, fascinating people in, translators and language people, global UX people, and interpreters and language lovers. And what we find is every one of them says translation 100% will always be needed. There are things that the machines will do. We know that. And we're going to talk more about that too. But there's things that they don't do well, and that's where humans come in. And I think maybe a really big key is keep that passion and that heart, and that will always drive you forward.
Absolutely.
So, what's the situation? Why does this stick in our mind? What are people worried about? Carrie, what's the elephant in the room others have talked about today?
Are robots taking over? Is artificial intelligence going to take my job away? Yeah, it's always been there.
Yeah.
Sci-fi movies have, really focused on this topic for as long as I've been alive. That's for sure. And they're great. They're great at repetitive stuff. Um,
Mhm.
but they're not so good at creating. Even the neural stuff and the AI that remembers, right? It's for certain types of content, we'll never use machine translation. It just doesn't work. But there's definitely a proper place for AI. Um, and really, AI, I think, works best. It's funny, Diego got the question, can we use raw MT for certain types of content? I do at Subway.
Really? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Huh.
Um, as long as the gist is understood, I don't pay for a post edit. But uh, so um, so things like knowledge based articles.
Yeah.
Um, and when I was at Hyperion Solutions, we put something together for our technical documentation. Again, Diego mentioned that. Because it was repetitive and it was very non-creative content. It was quite boring, as we find, and so putting kind of a structured English or source
Yeah. Yeah.
language in place really allows for machine translation to flourish and makes it faster to market, cheaper, all the stuff that a buyer is looking to do.
Interesting.
Um, and it was really interesting because we kept this database of all these English phrases, and if we had a change in the software, the writer had to go to that database and say, have we used this sentence before? And if we have, boom, they put it in, and we already had the translation for it. So that saved us time and money, but it also allowed consistency across
Exactly.
our documentation. So
Exactly.
um,
And some people use data, some people use their TMS to inform how to write the English content, because if we use the words that are in the segments that are matches, high matches, reuse this segment and we'll save right there. So, and
absolutely.
simple English. I think, who was it, Eugene said earlier, the many different meanings of words, and it's classic right now. If you use Google Translate, and it'll make a mess of things because it doesn't know the
It
difference in
can.
context. A window on the wall and a computer window, oh my gosh, and we get into trouble all the time with that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
so using these in tools in a specific way, and then having an eye to the future about what we can do uh, to excel at what we do and allow the machines to do what they do well. In fact, you said the state of MT from Nintendo's yearly report has a really good uh, indicator. When content
It is.
is
I'm going to put it in
nuanced
the
rich,
chat here
yeah, put in the
if I
chat
could.
for everyone, yeah. And then
This is
when content is nuanced rich, educational content, that's really tough, in any kind of poetry and any kind of literature.
right.
Um,
And this just isn't our opinion, right? This is data-driven
yeah,
information. And what I
exactly.
like about Intento's report is it really goes through. They've studied this for years, and they do their report every year. It's free.
Sure.
Um,
Right.
And it's really interesting that, they evaluate all of the MT language pairs out there.
Sure.
And between last year and this year, I think, there were 40, I can't remember how many new language pairs there were in 1 year for
Wow.
MT.
Really
So yeah, it's growing.
interesting. Interesting. Okay. So, and thanks, Carrie, for putting in links for our viewers in chat so
Yeah.
everybody can access things. So now, this is so interesting, the future. What are the positive trends? I was poking around looking at things. I've always kind of looked at the future, but I've always been a little bit wary. In fact, Carrie, recently I saw a study where there's actually studies of brain science that show that thinking about the future is difficult for human beings because we put ourselves as a different person. Look it up, Google this idea of why do people have a difficult time looking at the future. Our brains doesn't work that way. But I
Mm,
think the advice I'm hearing is everyone think like a futurist. Think in terms of what's coming because it's good for your mental health to have an outlook on the future. It's good to be in the present moment. We understand that, but look to the future. And I took a look at this. I got caught up in this amazing article about Web 3.0 and the fourth industrial wave. Oh my gosh. And I saw a graph that shows the actual current day internet, and it shows websites are connected in a 2D representation. But Web 3.0, what they're calling the spatial web, takes these things with, they're calling it the concurrent exponential technologies. And it takes
good
this
God.
and it
How do you
just,
translate that?
good. We offer that as a challenge to everyone present here. But what's interesting is all the trends that are coming, and they're saying there's going to be a language layer associated with all of that. So you're going to see exponential technologies. You're going to see, what did we say? We counted off fintech, uh, medtech. There's just so many of these new things that are coming, and adaptive audio, video, gaming, biotech, climate tech, space tech, fintech. And then think about the disciplines, translation, localization. You could get involved in UX, you can get involved in Agile, you can learn project management. So just imagine all of these amazing new things coming, and everyone possibly has an amazing amount of new types of work. So ponder that for a
Absolutely.
minute.
Yeah. And like you said, I think it's important to follow your passions as you learn and grow and get jobs. You know, really anything is possible. I was, just very quick I was doing localization forever. And I was at my last job company, bodybuilding.com, and they asked me to really look into payment methods because we were using a US based payment gateway, and we did business overseas. Of course, a lot of our business came from overseas. It was muscle supplements, enhancement stuff. It wasn't hormones. It was like protein powder, creatine, and we felt we were just paying too much for the transactions from an international standpoint. So they put me in charge of a global payment gateway, um, and we ended up saving a bunch of money. But I got to dive into that. It's something I'd never done before, and just be open to opportunities that come your way because you never know what you might be introduced to and what you might find absolutely fascinating and love and switch careers. I ended up going back to localization, but I don't regret that experience at all because it really opened my mind, um, and to all the different payment methods, currency, everything that has to go into a transaction, and that end user experience is just so important. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but anyway,
Oh, that's a good
sorry.
tangent. No, that's a good tangent. And in our conversation, everything's relatable. And I'm totally there with you because, yeah, I went off. I've been working as a localization desktop publishing because that fit really well for me. I was in typography and I got to handle all these great languages. And one of the things that I found interesting, if I'd find something interesting, I'd go and investigate it. So I got pulled into web development. I did my own websites and I designed them and then I'd add language. So I think, just like you're saying, Carrie, just keep going and find what you like to do and learn as much as you can.
Yeah.
So we're coming up almost time to get into Q&A pretty soon, but I wanted to
Yeah.
go over with you, Carrie, what can we tell everybody? What are the next steps? What can we do to prepare?
Oh my gosh, there's so much information out there. It's almost overwhelming. Um, so to really, if you want to dive into the industry and pay for research, there are a couple companies that I really like. You already heard from Renato, Nimsy. You've got
Yay.
Common Sense Advisory and Slater. But there's also free stuff, of course. You can get previous recordings of webcasts from all these different LSPs that host virtual conferences. Uh, the ones that come to mind are Lingoport and Plexor. Lilt has something called Ascend. Um, and uh, you get to find out about all the different trends in the industry. And I think a big one right now is being gender neutral
Yeah.
in translation. And it's fascinating. I did some digging and I'm going to post a couple links here just about that. Um, and even, there's a free globalization playbook, out there. And I'll
Yes.
post that in the chat as well. It's fascinating what you can find out once you start digging. How about you?
Yeah, so excellent. So those are industry level. And then personally, going to free conferences, paid conferences, Pythagoras Translation Club. Yay, you've gone online and global. There's one right there. Then there's also Look from Home, like you said, Ascend. And then ATA is in US, American Translators Association, I believe. It's an association. You can go to their conference, Local Gala, SlaterCon, and then all of the others that come along. There's going to be many more, so many things to dig in and find out. Podcasts, so there's so many. Oh my gosh, we'll have to put a list because there's our friend Katrin with the Worldly Marketer, Globally Speaking, Global Growth. Yeah, just put all those
Here,
in
I'll paste
copy
that
and
one in the
paste.
chat
Yeah,
too. I'll paste
very
that
good.
big list. Just
There's a lot, and it's all really good, and you're gonna get inspired and learn from that. So,
and
okay,
it's
we've
free.
got, and it's free. Yeah, that's the beauty, especially of podcasts. And when I do my localization explain something I've just barely started, I'm just enjoying talking to people, like I enjoy talking to you, Carrie. But everybody that I get a chance to talk to, you get to hear something that you don't normally hear other ways. So look for
Yeah.
those opportunities.
Yeah.
All right. So, and then also in preparing to be a translator, how do you set yourself apart from others? There's many of them who do marketing of themselves. They make profiles of themselves, they get involved, and that's a great way to get opportunities. Well, we're almost out of time. We have a little bit of time for Q&A, and I want to just quickly check on that. Whoops, we got this here. I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to turn off my screen sharing. That's what I
We do
wanted
have
to
a
do.
question from Umberto,
Yeah.
and it's to me. What do I localize at Subway? I think it's more than what the customer sees. Oh yes, are you kidding? uh, so I'm a centralized function within Subway. So all the departments come to me for their translation needs. I should say globalization needs, right? Because sometimes we have to internationalize an app, or we have to localize some e-learning to make it relevant for this particular country or region. So you name it, I've got e-learning. I've got the legal stuff, so all the contracts are NDA, right? That's translated into, I don't know, 14 different languages or something like that. So it's believe it or not, it's not terribly client facing, the stuff that I deal with. It's more
Sure.
the franchisee and their employees. So the sandwich artists, the people that make the sandwich, we want to make sure we train them properly, right? So we have to localize and translate all of our training materials. So yeah, it's Umberto, it's everything.
Absolutely. And Carrie, something I noticed about Subway is so amazing that you have specifically embracing the markets. So your sandwich offerings, I noticed in Lithuania, there's sandwich offerings with some of the local food and other in
Oh, sure.
Japan and Korea. So
Oh, yeah.
kudos to Subway for bringing in the food of the region, but then also giving the food that you have in America to serve to everyone around the world. That's
I
really
think we've got like
excellent.
one sandwich that is global, and I think that's our BMT, but I'm not sure. And of course,
Uh-huh.
that's not in India because there's meat involved. But yeah, in Russia, we have, I think, over 400 restaurants in Russia
Right.
alone. So yeah, go across the street and grab a sandwich when we're done.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, and we don't have in the chat little area right now. I think that might be something new that people didn't realize is
Oh,
there.
look at
But
this.
in the
Catherine
chat corner,
has a
yeah.
list of podcasts. That's awesome. Thank you,
Thanks,
Catherine.
thanks, Catherine.
Yep.
And Catherine Christaki also mentioned the hot topics this year, and these are good points. Diversity and inclusion, yeah. Hiring
Oh,
in
yeah.
times of COVID, remote
Yep.
working, yeah, those are really, really big. And again, there's going to be opportunities in all of these things and all of these materials. So yeah, I think we covered a lot of ground quite quickly.
I
Checked
hope it
out
was
everything.
helpful.
Yeah, and everything, your networking that you do, everyone, is precious because the more people you know, the more knowledge you know, the better things are. I hope we've been helpful to you, and want to thank Piotr Translation Club again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ladies. And we also have a question for you from one of our guests who are joining us from the location. So we have an integrative double side event. So I have a real paper with a real question. So
Let's
Oh
hear it.
wow, real paper. Go ahead.
just here live in the studio. So how can we be gender neutral translating into Russian when each and every intimate noun and corresponding verbs and adjectives are affected by gender? That's a
Yeah.
Не
good one. They
понимаю.
also
No,
provide some
Я не
as
говорю
more
по-русски.
is
But what is interesting because there are languages, yes, absolutely, Russian, Polish, many of them struggle with the concept. But Carrie, didn't you mention there was some link that showed how this works in Russian? Do you happen to have that
Was it
handy or can
Russian?
you
I
dig it
thought
up?
it was Sweden has figured it out, I think, or maybe it was
Sweden's got
Finland, but
it,
one of the,
got it in there.
the Nordics,
But
but
it's,
it's in the link, that
yeah,
gender neutral link. It was really fascinating. If you click on the, um, let's see, the babbel.com link, if you can hopefully get
yeah,
to it, right? I think that really
okay,
talked about where things were.
I see it,
Yeah, it doesn't work
yeah.
in Russia, unfortunately. Okay, yeah.
Okay, so exception to the rule, and we're talking to a Russian primarily audience, oh my. But keep in
But
mind,
it's
we're
good to
talking
know. I
about
think it's good to know.
trends. Because even if
Yes.
this doesn't come for your particular language, you need to know about it in other languages. So keep that in mind because you're going to be translating into other languages. And it will be, I think it'd be great for your career to be aware of what tendencies are and trends for other languages. Does that answer your
Right.
question, Anna, in a roundabout way?
I hope it does. And also, I wanted to mention that for Russian, for a lot of translation back when I was an intern, the rule of gender neutrality that works for Russian is not translated everything as default him.
Mm,
That will be a step that needs to be taken.
Yes.
Some people still do that. I see that a lot of localized content, especially if they use MT, features a him pronoun. So
yeah.
maybe that also would be helpful to some of you who want to know how gender neutrality works in Russian. But it's a very interesting question, and I know that we are going to see this, expand in the next 2 years. I think maybe next
sure.
Categories Translation Club will have the answer for that.
Great.
There you go.
Just
Great to see you then. All right.
so much. It was really interesting, and yeah, I will check out the survey for the BMT that you mentioned,
Go right away. Thanks, everybody.
and
Thanks,
I will
Spasiba.
summarize everything. Thank you so much. We have to move forward. We